Hi there. Recently, the issue of changing and deteriorating climate has been particularly accurate. All over the world, various thermal anomalies are observed, which are alarming in their scale and dynamics of distribution. The beginning of 2019 turned out to be abnormally cold for residents of the American Midwest. January 30th, the temperature in Chicago dropped to minus 28 degrees Fahrenheit. Over 150 years of meteorological observation of the city, this happened only once. In North Dakota, weather services recorded frost at minus 35 degrees. The current climatic situation significantly affected the life of the region. During the cold season, schools and other state institutions closed, and interruptions in public transport began. Forecasters associate extreme frosts in places that are not categorized by similar temperature regime with global climate change, and the state of Illinois is no exception. Last fall, California fires were the most devastating in state history. Apparently, for Californians in 2019, the situation will not improve. Forest fires did not abate throughout the second half of October, and their area reached more than 17,000 acres. Due to the threat of wire breaks, energy companies were forced to disconnect electricity from more than 2 million homes across 36 state districts. California Governor Gavin Newsom said among the causes of the unremitting fire element was climate change. In fact, according to studies, the average temperature in California has risen dramatically over the past half-century. Because of this, the number of arid, fire-hazardous areas in the state forests is increasing. In addition, according to the California Natural Resources Agency, the environmental situation in the region will only worsen over time. On October 24, 2019, a fierce storm hit the territory of the Brazilian state of Minas Gerais. During this time, a large amount of rainfall fell. The storm brought with it hail, and a large number of trees fell down and caused the death of one person. This year, similar natural disasters are not uncommon for a hot country. In September 2019, this could be observed in the Brazilian cities of Curitiba and Paraná. In almost the entire history of Brazil, it was difficult to imagine regular storms accompanied by strong hail. But as this year shows, new weather patterns are emerging and are becoming a new kind of standard for Brazilians. In September 2019, heavy snow fell in the Australian capital Canberra. Such a weather manifestation is generally unusual for Australia with its temperature climate, so what happened can safely be called a weather anomaly. Snow fell at night after a hot day, when the air temperature reached 77 degrees Fahrenheit, but already the next morning it fell to 32 degrees. It is surprising that the weather forecasters were unable to predict that snowfall, a cyclone, or a cold front was coming. All of this happened all of a sudden. The Meteorological Bureau of Australia simply threw up its arms, saying that they themselves were taken by surprise. A little later, they suggested that the sudden onset of night rain had cooled so much into the air and ground that it led to snow falling. The Australians were not ready for this natural occurrence, so the snow complicated the movement on the roads. Snowstorms could also be observed in Melbourne and Sydney. And all of this in Australia, the driest continent, most of which is occupied by deserts. Local meteorologists see the reason for the increased snowfall in the arrival of cold air masses from the Antarctic, which until recently almost never happened. All these events make it possible to doubt the relevance of climate maps, and the idea of the science of meteorology and climatology is becoming increasingly devalued every year. The planet is undergoing an irreversible change, the exact nature of which no one can predict in the future. Due to the changing climate, agriculture, animal husbandry, and fishing are severely affected. For example, rising sea levels can affect rice fields and fish farms. Territories may become unsuitable for the corresponding industries, which will lead to economic collapse in these regions. The end of October was also marked by a series of fires in northwestern Mexico. According to the local Civil Security Administration, in just 3 days of the fire element, the area of the burning territory reached 35 acres. More than 300 houses in 4 municipalities were destroyed by fire. In addition, according to NASA, smoke from the fires were visible even from space. As in the case of California, the Mexican climate became even drier, which provoked a similar situation. According to Stephen Cross, a professor of biochemistry from the University of Birmingham, the spontaneous nature of natural manifestations is largely associated with a change in the movement of the high-altitude jet stream to the troposphere. This is a strong wind in the form of a narrow airstream, which creates those very turbulent zones for aviation. In recent years, the high-altitude jet stream has begun to change, which, according to Krauss, leads to numerous weather excesses of varying degrees of intensity. There has long been a consensus in the scientific community that burning fossil fuels contributes to climate change. But what is the degree of influence on the destruction of the ozone layer and the melting of glaciers? No one can say for sure. The meteorologist Herbert Lamb, who is called the father of modern climatology, believed that the current situation cannot be explained by just increasing the level of carbon dioxide emissions into the atmosphere. Lamb considered heat generation to be no less a problem, which inevitably comes out when burning fossil fuels. But even with this in mind, a major volcanic eruption or nuclear test will produce much more heat than burning coal on an industrial scale. And in 2009, Swedish climatologists suggested a much greater effect of thermal emissions on the atmosphere compared to the emission of CO2. However, this is only one of the areas affecting climate change. There are other factors that few people talk about. Chinese scientists believe that heat from the bowels of the Earth itself can contribute to an increase in global temperature. According to their theory, fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas, located below the surface of the Earth, are an insulating layer between the surface of the planet and its red-hot core. At the same time, the void remaining in the bowels of the Earth after the extraction of minerals is filled with water, a less effective insulator. By the virtue of this theory, a study of climatologists from the University of Glasgow works. According to their data, the long history of coal mining from mines in the northeast of England has changed the bowels of the Earth in this region. Today, the atmosphere above the mines is much warmer than in other places nearby, and the underground water pumped out from the inside turned out to be warm. Thus, heated water enters the oceans, raising its temperature, which accelerates the melting of ice in Antarctica. Scientists came to the conclusion that a similar effect can be observed in all former coal deposits, and this is only a small part of the problem. Today, more and more scientists claim that the ruin of the bowels of the Earth negatively affect the climate. The extraction of minerals not only worsens the environmental conditions for future generations, but also right now affects the life of the planet. The production of resources from the soil invariably affects the terrain, creating quarries and ravines from the cultivated soil on which plants can no longer exist. Fossil byproducts pollute the soil and release toxins that can poison biological organisms. In addition, during the primary processing of the extracted products, large volumes of methane and carbon dioxide are thrown into the air, and water resources are also depleted. But if you look at the problem of climate change in a comprehensive manner, the human impact on temperature increases do not exceed several percent. However, today the powers that be want to use the anthropogenic factor as a lever of pressure on the economies of developing countries to try to eliminate competitors and once again enrich themselves on quotas. Environmental awareness from a model of behavior risks becoming a real lever of pressure on the world's population, while the development of fossil resources continues, worsening the already deplorable state of ecology on the planet. But is it possible to make a difference? Unfortunately, what is happening with the planet right now is a cyclic process, and changes will occur whether we want it to or not. But what we can do is stop listening to politicians who worry only about the elections, as well as about all the wallets of those who sponsor them, and start preparing for the upcoming challenges. Nobody will take care of us except for ourselves. Only people themselves, united, will be able to overcome the future climatic collapse. Realizing this simple truth, let us spread the call for universal unity of people for the sake of the salvation of all mankind. Let's make this go viral and have a ton of people learn about this and what awaits us. Please share this video on social networks. Take care of yourself, thanks for watching, and subscribe for more.